President Yoon Suk-yeol holds talks with Japan's Prime Minister Yoon-Kishida, who's visiting South Korea for 2 days before he leaves office. The agenda includes looking back on what's been achieved so far with regard to strained Seoul-Tokyo ties. South Korea posted a current account surplus for the third straight month in July, reaching over $9 billion, driven by robust chip exports. Seoul's iconic fashion event takes place this week, showcasing eye-catching K-fashion and, this year, sustainable fashion. It's September 6, 6 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. President Yoon just wrapped up a summit with Japanese Prime Minister Yoon-Kishida in Yongsan, which would be their last summit before Kishida steps down from his current post. For more, let's connect to our correspondent Kim Do-yeon at the presidential office. Do-yeon, what is the latest?
Good evening, Jungmin. President Yoon Suk-yeol welcomed the Japanese Prime Minister at around 3:30 p.m. earlier this afternoon. This is the 12th and the last summit between the two because, as you said, Kishida is set to step down from his post at the end of this month. The two leaders have worked together since a year and a half ago when the so-called shuttle diplomacy was revived by the two leaders. Take a listen to what they had to say about each other.
총리님과 함께 일궈온 성과들은 제가 대통령에 취임한 이후 가장 의미 있는 일이었습니다. 경제와 안보를 비롯한 여러 분야에서 정부 간 협의체들이 모두 복원되었습니다. 그리고 활발한 소통과 협의가 이루어지고 있습니다.
Since President Yoon's significant decision in March of last year, dialogue and cooperation between our two countries have begun to advance significantly in many areas, following the direction that we set forth together at the Tokyo summit.
After a simple, short welcoming, the two first met with their top diplomatic officials, such as the Foreign Minister, National Security Advisor, and others. Then the two got into an expanded group meeting. According to Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Tae-hyo just moments ago, the two sides reached several agreements. First, they agreed that the two countries would aid each other's citizens upon conflict in third countries. They will share information regarding their overseas nationals, acknowledging that this cooperation framework would add to the protection of their citizens. Second, they also agreed to simplify the border entry for both sides. Furthermore, South Korea has received documents from Japan listing the victims of forced labor during Imperial Japan's wartime colonization of Korea.
All right, now let's delve a little bit more into the summit. Tell us about the significance.
As for the background, the local media have dubbed the two's relationship as bromance. Before President Yoon visited Tokyo in March 2023, the two nations were not enjoying the best of relationships. There was a big historical issue between them, the compensation for Korean victims forced to work by Japan during World War II. But as I said, with President Yoon offering a solution from the South Korean side first, the two leaders revived the relationship, leading to the current rate of civilian exchanges and more. Also, in terms of security, they expanded cooperation, including the trilateral Camp David summit with the U.S., where the three countries documented security exchanges. In addition, the two won the John F. Kennedy Profile Encourage Award together. Now, more details on their way. I'll make sure to have an update for you at our later newscast. Jungmin.
Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon, many thanks. Amid the major medical dispute so far lasted for over half a year, the government and the ruling party hinted at a possible adjustment in the size of expanding the medical school admissions quota, as they proposed a dialogue with doctors' organizations. Eyes are on whether there could be a breakthrough. Lee Si-hoo reports.
This is a move that may potentially thaw the frosty relationship with doctors that has lasted nearly 7 months since the government announcement of the medical school enrollment increase. The ruling party and the government shared their willingness on Friday to discuss the potential size of the increase for the 2026 medical school admissions quota. People Power Party floor leader Chu Kyung-ho urged the medical doctors who resigned from their hospital posts to protest the greater enrollment at medical schools to look for a logical solution together with the government and the ruling party. Meanwhile, both the PPP and the main opposition Democratic Party throughout this week have suggested a special body consisting of members from the rival parties, the government, and doctors' organizations to discuss the numbers for 2026. The ruling party especially deems the quota for 2025 unnegotiable, as it's already been announced on application guides. However, the doctors assert the need to discuss the quota for both years, saying they should reconsider the numbers for 2025 first. 이시후, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea's current account logged yet another surplus in the month of July, bolstered by exports of semiconductors. Lee Soo-jin has the latest numbers.
South Korea's current account was in the black for the third straight month in July on the back of strong semiconductor exports. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday showed that the country's overall current account balance in July logged a surplus of $9.1 billion. After swinging into the red for the first time in a year in April, the current account balance once again recorded a surplus in May and has remained in the black for 3 consecutive months. And while July's surplus is smaller than that of June when the nation recorded its largest current account surplus in nearly 7 years, it was the largest for the month of July since 2015. With this latest data, the current account balance in the first 7 months of the year tallied up to around $47 billion, a significant surge from the $5.2 billion recorded the previous year over the same period. The latest figures for July were mainly driven by the goods balance, which tracks exports and imports of products. The goods balance logged a surplus of $8.5 billion, marking the 16th consecutive month in the black. While that surplus was smaller than the June surplus, it was larger than the one recorded in July 2023. Exports rose nearly 17% on year in July to $58.6 billion, mainly driven by strong demand for semiconductor chips. This is the 10th consecutive month that outbound shipments have shown an increase, with chip exports rising around 50% compared to the previous year. But imports also saw an increase of 9.4%. The services balance once again recorded a deficit amounting to $2.4 billion, which was similar to the previous year when it came to $2.6 billion, but larger compared to 1 month ago when it logged $1.6 billion.
The services balance logged a larger deficit than the previous month, as the travel deficit grew due to the increase in outbound tourism from the summer holiday season.
The Bank of Korea official also projected that the current account will record a surplus in the second half of the year, as exports are expected to remain strong with the continued recovery in the global manufacturing sector. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Following a reported case of an EV catching fire recently making headlines here in this country, the authorities have come up with measures which include disclosing key information on batteries. Park Go-nu tells us more.
1 month after an electric vehicle caught fire in an underground parking lot in the city of Incheon and destroyed scores of other cars, the South Korean government announces EV safety measures to prevent similar cases from happening.
We'll make sure that EV batteries and charging facilities are safe. We'll check battery safety in advance and make it mandatory to disclose major information, including the battery manufacturer and technologies used.
The certification system for EV batteries was originally planned to be implemented in February 2025, but has been brought forward as a pilot project. Cell manufacturers and major raw materials are now classed as major information to be revealed mandatorily, along with battery capacity and maximum output, which has already been disclosed. The government also came up with ways to protect consumers in case their electric vehicles catch fire. EV makers will have to take out liability insurance policies for their products, or they won't receive subsidies when manufacturing electric vehicles. And a battery management system that monitors the status of car batteries will be widely used in more vehicles from now on. More details related to these safety measures are set to be discussed until the end of this year. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
North Korea continues to float waste-carrying balloons into South Korea, and this time it sent some 260 such balloons between Thursday evening and early Friday morning. They were carrying paper and plastic bottles. According to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, about 140 balloons landed in the greater Seoul region. North Korea has launched thousands of trash balloons in recent months in protest of propaganda leaflets floated up north by North Korean activists and defectors here in the south. Pundits have made note of the timing of the latest launches as it coincides with Japanese Prime Minister Kishida's visit and the upcoming Chuseok holiday. Over in Gaza, as the first phase of polio vaccinations has ended, Israel resumed striking the strip, leaving at least 5 people dead and numerous injured. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says 90% of a ceasefire deal was ready. Cha Yoon-kyung has more.
At least 5 people were killed in a tent camp near Al-Aqsa Hospital, which was hit by an Israeli airstrike, leaving a scene of devastation. The strike, which killed women and children, occurred on Thursday local time, without warning near Gaza's largest hospital, which was considered a safe zone as a place of treatment, a few hours after the World Health Organization revealed that the first phase of the polio campaign has concluded successfully in Gaza. Health officials said the vaccination program was built around the deal between Israel and Hamas made last week for brief pauses in hostilities in Gaza. The WHO said the vaccinations will be carried out for 9 days in total, in the order of central, southern, and northern Gaza, adding that the second phase, which began on Thursday in the south, is scheduled to last 3 days. The third and final phase is planned for northern Gaza. In a separate attack, an Israeli airstrike reportedly also hit the northern part of the Gaza Strip, killing at least 4 people after striking in the vicinity of the Kamal Adwan hospital, according to Palestinian officials. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated that 90% of a deal was ready to finalize the Gaza truce at a news conference during a visit to Haiti on Thursday local time, saying there were still some remaining issues, including the Philadelphia corridor. Blinken said that it was incumbent on both parties to get to yes on these remaining issues, urging Israel and Hamas to share ideas on reaching a ceasefire deal in Gaza. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denied the assertion on Wednesday local time, saying it's not close in an interview with Fox News. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
The White House has denounced Russian leader Vladimir Putin's interference in U.S. domestic politics. This follows Mr. Putin's public assertion of support for Democratic contender Kamala Harris in the upcoming U.S. presidential race. Lee Seung-jae has the details.
It's an endorsement U.S. Vice President and Democrat presidential candidate Kamala Harris doesn't need. One from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Speaking on the sidelines of the Eastern Economic Forum on Thursday, the Russian leader jokingly endorsed Harris for president.
We had the current president, Mr. Biden, as our favorite, if I can call it that, but now he has been taken out of the race. But he recommended that all his allies support Harris. That's what we're going to do. We're going to support her. That's first of all and second of all.
Putin further jokingly expressed his support, saying that her expressive and infectious laugh shows that she's doing well. Former U.S. President and Republican candidate Donald Trump has attacked Harris for her laugh throughout the campaign, going as far as to call her Laughing Kamala. The Russian leader added that Trump has imposed a large number of sanctions on Russia, expressing hope that Harris would refrain from taking such actions if she wins the elections. He also stressed that as the U.S. president is chosen by the American people, he will respect that decision. In response to Putin's remarks, the White House on Thursday called on the Russian leader to stop interfering in U.S. elections.
Mr. Putin ought to stop talking about our elections, period. He shouldn't be favoring anybody, one way or another. The only people who should get to determine who the next president of the United States is the American people. And we would greatly appreciate it if Mr. Putin would A, stop talking about our election, and B, stop interfering in it.
The comments also come after Washington charged 2 employees of Russia's state-run news network RT for money laundering, saying they paid an American company to create online content to influence the 2024 election. 이승재, Arirang News.
The U.S. Commerce Department has unveiled fresh export curbs on critical technologies such as quantum computing to foreign countries of concern, including China. These are less likely to impact South Korean companies. Pei-Eun-ji reports.
The United States unveiled new controls on the exporting of advanced technologies that are crucial to its national security. The rules affect quantum computing items, such as components, materials, software, and technology that can be used in the development and maintenance of quantum computers. They also impact manufacturing equipment for advanced chips, as well as a cutting-edge semiconductor technology called gate-all-around field effect transistors that help develop high-performance chips used in supercomputers. In an announcement on Thursday local time, the U.S. Department of Commerce said the new measures were implemented for national security and foreign policy reasons, as it seeks to harmonize controls with like-minded countries. The worldwide export controls include exemptions for countries that have similar measures in place, such as Japan and the Netherlands, as well as other allies. South Korea was not immediately included in that list, but the U.S. reportedly plans to approve export licenses for South Korea, so there will likely be limited impact on South Korean companies. The latest export curbs appear to be targeting China and other adversaries such as Russia and Iran to prevent them from accessing cutting-edge technologies. This comes amid recent fears that advanced chips and components could help boost China's military capabilities. Senior U.S. commerce official Alan Estevez said in a statement on Thursday that the latest export controls make it significantly difficult for Washington's adversaries to develop and deploy these technologies in ways that threaten their collective security. Pei-Eun-ji, Arirang News.
This week, Seoul Fashion Week takes place in the capital, showcasing exciting Korean fashion and more on the global stage. Our Yoon-Kishida guides us through major takeaways.
K-pop stars NewJeans are ready to make waves in the fashion world, serving as the 2025 Spring and Summer Seoul Fashion Week's ambassadors for the second year. The girl group aims to elevate global interest in K-fashion. This year's Seoul Fashion Week runs from September 3rd to September 7th at Dongdaemun Design Plaza and other locations in the city. Seoul has become a fashion hotspot, with Seoul Fashion Week leading the way. The week showcases cutting-edge K-fashion and provides emerging Korean brands with a global stage. Let's dive into the fashion trends and standout moments from this year's event.
Fashion industry is kind of high level, I would say, because there are a lot of brands compared to Russia, for example, and also a lot of ways to express yourself.
I took lots of pictures today, over there and in front of the teddy bear. I also did some challenges.
The opening fashion show featured designer Imuel's streetwear brand, User. It kicked off the 21 runway shows scheduled over the 5-day fashion week. This year's Fashion Week centers on the theme Sustainable Fashion. Fashion brand Parts is showing its collection to emphasize the urgent need for fashion to be more sustainable.
Parts has adhered to a zero-waste philosophy using only one material for the past 13 years.
The essence of Seoul Fashion Week lies in connecting brand designers and buyers, and this season features 95 brands and over 100 global buyers. Another innovative fashion event born to facilitate cultural exchange between South Korea and Italy is Milan Loves Seoul. Following its successful debut in Milan last February, the event has now landed in Seoul. An exclusive exhibition and fashion show featuring leading brands from both countries is hosted at High Street Italia, located on Gangnam's trendy Garosu-gil Street. The project creators view Korea as the most interesting place to create something new.
This place is evolving very fast, and we think that in Italy we need this kind of networking with the Korean designers. So Milan Loves Seoul really loves Korea, and I think that Korea really loves Italy.
We hope that thanks to this project, our Italian designer will open a new market here in Korea, find new business opportunity for them, but same Korean designer in Italy.
Italian brand Noskra displays its collection that has a touch of the latest Korean fashion trends.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of connection between Italy and Korea, especially in the fashion world. I think the product, the concept, and the silhouette are like in line with the Korean taste.
The event is about more than just fashion. It's a cultural exchange between Korea and Italy. 13 Italian designers are showcasing their work, and on September 7th, Korean and Italian designers will team up for a special fashion show. For the Korean models, the show gives them the opportunity to work with Italian designers.
It's such a great honor to be able to take part in this amazing event. Given the opportunity to model and represent Milan brands in South Korea. I'm so grateful, thankful.
I wear the clothes for Francesca Cottone, and the color is everything, and it's so beautiful. I'm genuinely grateful to participate as model with these amazing designer brands and fabulous clothes. So I'll do my best to show you guys a great look.
Seoul, brimming with style, shows how fashion can connect countries and people with a touch of chic. Yoon-Hee, Arirang News.
As the easterly winds blow, it is currently raining on the east coast and scattered showers are passing over other inland areas. It will continue lightly until tonight, but be careful because it can fall strongly with gusty winds and lightning in the southern parts of the country. There will be a lot of clouds across the country this weekend, so preparations are necessary for surprise showers. Tomorrow, showers will pass over western parts of Gangwon-do province and southern parts of the Chungcheong-do provinces and the southwest. On Sunday, showers will be seen in western parts of Gangwon-do province and southern regions. Tomorrow morning's temperature will start at 24 degrees Celsius in Seoul, and there will be many places below 25 degrees. Seoul will move up to 31 along with Daejeon, Gwangju, Gyeongju, and Busan. With a lot of clouds passing over inland areas next week, late heat of above 30 degrees is expected to continue until the end of next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thanks for watching. A panel session up next.
학교 다니면서 작업을 이제 꾸준히 했는데 그때마다 이제 버려지는 재료들이 꽤 많더라고요. 이렇게 버려지는 게 다 어떻게 될까? 새로운 활용이 못 되고 다 버려진다고 하더라고요. 이런 것들을 저희가 그냥 조금씩이라도 기여를 해볼 수 있지 않을까? 폐도자기는 안에 이제 흙 내부에 볼대처럼 역할을 해서 뭔가 크랙이 가거나 하는 문제들을 좀 많이 보완을 해줘요. 흙을 이제 저희가 주물주물 만져서 가마에 넣어서 최종 결과물이 나오기까지 한 15% 이상 이제 수축이 되는데 폐도자기를 흙에 섞게 되면은 이 수축률이 15% 이상에서 한 10%까지 줄어들어요. 사이즈를 작게 만들어도 내가 원하는 사이즈를 만들 수 있고 한다는 장점들이 있어요. 화분이라는 아이템을 선택한 거는 폐 자원을 활용을 해서 내 입이 닿는 식기를 만든다면 그게 좀 거부감이 있을 것 같다고 저희가 판단을 했어요. 그래서 가급적이면 사람들 몸에서 좀 멀리 떨어뜨릴 수 있는 제품이 뭘까를 고민했을 때 그게 화분이었어요. 보통 가정에서 폐도자기를 어떻게 버리는지 좀 잘 모르고 계시는 분들이 있어요. 지금 현재 계획하고 있는 거는 이 재료에 대한 안정성을 좀 검증을 해서 식기 제품을 생산하는 게 이제 가장 가까운 계획이고요. 최대한 이런 폐도자기가 활용될 수 있는 방법들을 많이 만드는 게 저희의 목표입니다. 나는 버려진 도자기에 새로운 쓰임을 만드는 그리너입니다.
실제로 삶 속에서 살아있는 조각을 한번 만들어보자라고 하는 프로젝트에서 9명이 이제 모여서 만들어진 밴드입니다.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm Handan in Seoul. It's been a busy week for President Yoon Suk-yeol after holding talks with New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon earlier this week. He held a summit with Japanese Prime Minister Yoon-Kishida in Seoul today as the two leaders continued their efforts to maintain a cordial Seoul-Tokyo relationship. The summits came as South Korea faces evolving security challenges on the Korean Peninsula, in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. In today's episode of Within the Frame, we look into the summit outcomes and their significance with Kim Yang-yu, principal researcher at the East Asia Institute. It's always great to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
And joining us from Washington, D.C. is Bruce Klingner, senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Thank you, as always, for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, Dr. Kim, let's start off with you. Let's first discuss the purpose of Kishida's visit to South Korea. Why did he seek a 12th summit with President Yoon just before stepping down?
Well, I think this is a perfect question to start with. According to what we hear from President Yoon's office, Prime Minister Kishida's visit to South Korea is a pivotal moment to review the progress made through this shuttle diplomacy just you mentioned and discuss a future cooperation before he steps down. This visit isn't just about reflecting on past achievements, but also about setting future course for bilateral, regional, and global collaborations. Many might not remember, but in 2006, Prime Minister Koizumi made a symbolic visit to Graceland, the home of Elvis Presley, with the previous President George W. Bush. And Koizumi was a huge Elvis fan, and it was Bush's way of thanking Koizumi for his strong support of the U.S.-Japan alliance, especially during the Iraq War, which was politically sensitive in Japan. So the Graceland visit symbolized the personal and political bond between the two leaders and solidified the U.S.-Japan alliance as Koizumi prepared to step down. Similarly, Kishida's visit to Seoul carries a sense of closure, but this time it might be Kishida who owes gratitude to President Yoon. Yoon's bold move to address forced labor compensation has been crucial in renewing relations between the two countries. Despite facing domestic criticism, Yoon has taken politically risky steps to improve ties with Japan, while Tokyo's response has remained cautious so far. It's clear the rest of the cup has yet to be filled. The summit presents the opportunity for Kishida to reciprocate in a meaningful way. While some speculate that Kishida's visit might be motivated by a desire to maintain influence within his party as a kingmaker, and I believe his commitment to the strengthening Seoul-Tokyo ties is genuine, especially since Camp David Trilateral Summit. President Yoon's diplomatic efforts have been significant, and Kishida's reciprocation with substantial measures could ensure that this positive momentum continues beyond his tenure.
Well, President Yoon, during opening remarks today prior to the summit, acknowledged that challenging issues remain between Seoul and Tokyo, but expressed hopes that the two neighbors will keep up the hard-sought momentum of cordial relations and work closer together towards a future-oriented relationship. And as you mentioned, Dr. Kim, Kishida's visit clearly reflects his will to express gratitude towards all of President Yoon's efforts. Now, Dr. Klingner, reviewing achievements made in Seoul-Tokyo bilateral cooperation was one of the main purposes of Kishida's visit. How do you assess the progress made by the leaders of Korea and Japan? And just as a side note, Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell thinks that President Yoon deserves a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, there really have been quite outstanding achievements since President Yoon's very bold, though politically risky move last year. But we've seen a resumption of bilateral South Korean-Japanese security, diplomatic, economic meetings, as well as initiatives that had really been frozen for a number of years. And then in conjunction with the United States, we've also seen very strong progress on trilateral issues, which were encapsulated in the Camp David agreements a year ago and then affirmed recently with a trilateral security agreement. So what we've seen is particularly on security issues, a resumption of military exercises, the large-scale U.S.-South Korea military exercises, and then the trilateral military exercises. So Deterrence of the three countries has now been strengthened, and the agreement to exchange real-time information on North Korean missile launches enables all three countries to be more secure. So South Korea is now better protected because of the exchange with Japanese and U.S. missile exchange information. So we've also seen a commitment by all three leaders to strengthen economic cooperation, to diversify away from an over-reliance on trade with China, supply chain guarantees. So really across the board, it's been very beneficial to all three countries, and really would not have been able to have those achievements had President Yoon not made his initiative in 2023.
And we'll talk more about South Korea, U.S.-Japan security ties as we move on. But before that, thorny issues still remain, Dr. Klingner, which include the issue of Japan's wartime forced labor. For our viewers who may not be so up to date on this issue, can you give us a quick recap on the progress made on this issue, and also your take on whether Kishida will show a more sincere approach during his visit?
Well, the South Korean Supreme Court has ruled that Japanese companies that used forced labor during the occupation would need to pay compensation to the victims. Japan responded that that would violate the 1965 treaty, which normalized diplomatic relations between the two companies, and so there was an impasse. And then President Yoon in 2023 came up with a solution to try to have a more forward-looking relationship with Tokyo, where a foundation predominantly of South Korean companies would provide compensation to the South Korean victims. Japanese companies were allowed to provide compensation, but I don't believe any have done so, although on a separate education fund for future development of bilateral relations, Japanese companies have provided donations to that. But President Yoon's initiative, although it was heavily criticized in South Korea, did enable the restoration of ties between the two countries, as we've been discussing, and enabled a more forward-looking initiative. So the U.S. welcomed the initiative. We've long been pushing the two allies to seek to focus on the threats of this millennium. And given the North Korean and Chinese threats, which are very dire and rising, it enabled a much greater focus on the threats of this millennium.
Kishida has reportedly said during the summit that it's heartbreaking that many Koreans had to go through difficult and painful experiences in the past, but he adhered to his position that he will succeed previous Japanese government's stance regarding Seoul-Tokyo historical feud. So we're still waiting for more details to come out of the summit and the press briefing that followed. And we'll also see how his visit and his remarks made will be received by the South Korean public. Now, Dr. Kim, some are questioning the practicality of the farewell summit between Yoon and Kishida. From your perspective, would the summit outcome meet the expectations of the Korean public that have largely been quite upset after Japan's listing of the Sado mine with UNESCO?
Well, I think it's now confirmed that this summit will lead to some practical outcomes, like the signing of memorandum of understanding for establishing a bilateral cooperation mechanism to facilitate joint efforts in evacuating citizens from conflict-zone in third countries, and like the shortening the immigration screening process for South Korean visitors. While many may downplay these steps as minor, but I think they represent a good start, especially in the context of public opinion data. And according to the regression analysis of the East Asia Institute's annual public opinion survey on South Korea's perception of Japan, those who have visited Japan are significantly more likely to hold favorable views of the country. And this correlation has been statistically significant year after year. Of course, correlation doesn't imply causation, and it's possible that people who already have a positive view of Japan are more inclined to visit. However, the general principle holds true, and personal cultural exchange are key to fostering better understanding between the nations, and these measures can contribute to that. That said, if the question is whether these steps are enough, to meet the broader expectation of the South Korean public? Those waiting for Japan to fill the rest of the cup? I have to say, unfortunately, no. According to EI survey this year, which will be released after Chuseok holiday, the only group supporting President Yoon's Japan policy are those who subscribe to the functionalist view. They believe that future-oriented functional cooperation areas like security, economy, and environment will gradually help resolve historical issues between the two countries. However, the majority of Koreans do not subscribe to this view. This is why Yoon's Japan policy remains unpopular domestically. A large portion of South Korean public feels that the real tipping point in strengthening bilateral relations can only be reached when Japan takes a bold move on historical justice and territorial issues, whether that's addressing forced labor, comfort women, history textbooks, just Korean Shirin or Dokdo. And I truly hope that Prime Minister Kishida, during his last visit summit with President Yoon, can make some meaningful and bold steps. But I don't think it happened this time.
As you pointed out, the two leaders signed an agreement that will allow South Korea and Japan to work together when evacuating their citizens from third countries during emergencies. And they also saw eye to eye on the need to simplify immigration procedures for citizens of both countries to further seek people-to-people exchanges. But as you pointed out, we don't know for sure if that's enough, right? Dr. Klingner, strengthened South Korea, U.S., Japan trilateral security ties are hailed as one of President Yoon's key diplomatic achievements, as you briefly mentioned. But with upcoming leadership changes, questions are arising about the future of this trilateral framework. Can it withstand the challenges ahead?
Well, there are always questions, and that's why the three leaders have been trying to really regularize and institutionalize the improvement in coordination and cooperation that we've seen in the last year and a half. The first election that comes up is in Japan. Prime Minister Kishida said he would not run for re-election as president of the ruling party, which means he will not maintain being prime minister. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty as to who will be his replacement, which will be announced later this month. A larger than regular number of candidates have announced their quest to be the new prime minister. But really on foreign and security policies, whoever is selected will not alter Japanese policies of the strong focus on the relationship and the alliance with the United States, the need to improve coordination against common security threats. The one concern would be that some of the Japanese candidates, the more conservative, even more nationalist candidates, might not be as enthusiastic as Prime Minister Kishida to maintain or expand relations between South Korea and Japan, and that would be of concern to Washington. The next election would be the United States, but neither former President Trump or Vice President Harris would move away from the focus on strengthening our alliances. There's some differences between the two candidates, but all would affirm the need to improve relations between our two critically important allies in Northeast Asia. The largest impact would be on a South Korean presidential election, which is not for some time. If a progressive candidate won, they tend to be more nationalistic and might try to inflame relations with Tokyo by focusing on the past rather than focusing on the future and the need to address common challenges and threats, as well as improve common opportunities between the three countries.
And moving on to another summit held this week, the leaders of South Korea and New Zealand held a summit in Seoul on Wednesday, agreeing to elevate bilateral relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Dr. Kim, how do you evaluate the outcome, and what does it mean for President Yoon's Indo-Pacific strategy?
Right. President Yoon and Prime Minister Locsin agreed to elevate ROK New Zealand relation to a comprehensive strategic partnership, and both leaders emphasized that the two countries are like-minded partners committed to share principles such as upholding democracy, preserving the rule of law, supporting multilateral organizations, free trade, and sustainable growth. And they also agreed to deepen cooperation in areas like trade, multilateral institutions, natural disaster response, education, monitoring North Korea's evasion of U.S. sanctions, denuclearization of DPRK, climate change, and South China Sea, among others. While these areas of cooperation are significant, and the emphasis remains largely on non-strategic issues. New Zealand's role in South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy has been relatively marginal, and even when mentioned, it is often grouped with countries like Australia, ASEAN, or NATO, rather than emphasized as a principal partner in an independent manner. This reflects its lower priority in Seoul's foreign policy, and one reason for this is New Zealand's late adoption of Indo-Pacific concept in 2021 and its long-standing identity as a Pacific power. And New Zealand has historically taken a cautious approach in China issues and has a complex domestic demographic mix, including Maori, Pacific Island, European influence, and Asian migrants. That influences its foreign policy as well. And notably, New Zealand suspended the U.S. In the 1980s due to its strong commitment to being a nuclear-free nation. And for some time, it was viewed as a weak link in the Five Eyes alliance due to its strategic ambiguity on China. However, New Zealand is now shifting from its earlier assumption of a benign strategic environment where China was primarily an economic partner and the U.S. provided security. Its consideration of involvement in Pillar 2 of AUKUS demonstrates that New Zealand is pivoting toward a more strategic role. And I believe that in the coming years, we will see greater alignment between South Korea and New Zealand, and the depth of their strategic cooperation will gradually become more prominent.
And the U.S. has long sought to institutionalize the grouping of South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, NATO's four Indo-Pacific partners, known as the IP4. Dr. Klingner, as these countries enter a period of heightened engagement, what do you foresee for their future security cooperation?
As you point out, the U.S. has long sought to not only institutionalize the trilateral relationship with Japan and South Korea against the North Korean threat, but also expand cooperation amongst Indo-Pacific partners against the very dire and growing China threat. Nations have tended to be a bit more hesitant in risking Beijing's anger in working together, but the Biden administration has sought to create what they call a lattice work of cooperation amongst allies and partners throughout the Indo-Pacific. And we've seen progress on that. Japan and Australia have been very forthright in their criticism of Beijing for its human rights violations, as well as its intimidating efforts and policies against neighbors in the East and South China Sea, its efforts to intimidate Taiwan. South Korea, even under the Yoon administration, has been much more hesitant to criticize Beijing while calling for stability in the Taiwan Straits. South Korea, unlike the United States, Japan, and Australia, doesn't even identify Beijing as the perpetrator of those actions. So President Yoon has pledged that South Korea will assume a larger security role in the Indo-Pacific. And I think some actions have been taken, but still sort of lagging behind other nations in the region. So we're urging that all nations work together against that growing Chinese threat. And I think we'll see cooperation, some of it sort of below the surface, as nations may be still hesitant to risk China's anger in what Beijing sees as a containment policy. Instead, the U.S. sees it as like-minded nations working together against a common threat. Not only the security threat from China, but also the economic threat in that Beijing seeks to intimidate smaller nations in the region to accommodate Beijing's wishes.
And our final point of discussion today, Dr. Kim, President Yoon is expected to visit the Czech Republic later this month as part of efforts to finalize a mega nuclear reactor contract. Now, hurdles remain, though, such as the legal action from the U.S.-based Westinghouse, which has filed an appeal to the Czech anti-monopoly office against the Czech government's selection of a South Korean firm for the nuclear plant building project. What would President Yoon bring home from the visit?
Right. The deal in question is 24 trillion won nuclear power plant project, and the Czech Office for the Protection of Competition has begun official procedures in response to objections from the US-based Westinghouse, as you just mentioned, and France's Electricité de France, EDF, concerning South Korea's bid. And Westinghouse has raised the intellectual property rights as well. Their concerns due to its historical involvement in constructing South Korea's first nuclear power plants. And while EDF has claimed that the tender conditions were violated, and it has requested contracts cancellation. And this isn't the first time Westinghouse has raised such concerns, and simulation occurred during the South Korea's successful nuclear deal with the UAE in 2009. And at the time, South Korea opted for cooperation, working with Westinghouse on plant installation. This suggests that South Korea has experience in managing these kinds of disputes diplomatically. As for EDF's complaint, I think it is worth noting that EDF has a poor track record when it comes to meeting delivery schedules and staying within cost parameters, which might weaken their case. What's more important is broader context of the President Yoon's visit. During a recent meeting with Czech National Security Advisor Tomáš Pojar, President Yoon, it was made clear that the Czech Republic is seeking comprehensive cooperation beyond just nuclear energy, and that the Czech government is interested in collaboration across sectors like industry, investment, defense, and transportation. And this is why the heads of the South Korean largest conglomerates, Jung Il-sung, Lee Jae-yong, Choi Tae-won, Gu Gang-mo, are accompanying President Yoon on this visit. And their presence signals South Korea's commitment to broader long-term economic and industrial cooperation with the Czech government. Given this comprehensive approach and diplomatic and business muscle behind President Yoon's visit, I think it's likely that the nuclear power deal will be concluded during his visit.
President Yoon's trip to the Czech Republic, another trip of high significance to keep close tabs on. We'll leave our discussion there. Very timely and meaningful discussions we had today. Thank you so much, Dr. Kim, for your insights.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Dr. Klingner, as always, for your perspectives.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time next week. We'll be back with more, same time next Monday. Have a great weekend.